So welcome to the last talk in the Education and Diversity session. Very pleased to have Joshua Stough here, who graduated with his PhD in 2008 working with Pfizer. And he is currently at Technica, and he also has an affiliation with George Mason University, where he teaches a networks class, I believe he said. And he's going to tell us about improvements to undergraduate CS education. Thanks, Joshua.
Thank you. That was a really broad title. I figured I'd come in and I'd be the only one who wanted to talk about undergraduate education. But since that isn't true, now I'm going to tell you all how to do it. So instead of doing that, I really wanted to kind of have a conversation instead about what sort of things you find really effective in teaching. Now, I think Mark already mentioned a number of these in his talk, and I have a few more. I wanted to point out a couple of things. I know that the previous speaker noted that there's a diversity problem, and so did Mitch earlier. These are sort of topics that I think are of interest in undergraduate CS education at this point. We want to make it accessible and complete in the sense that you could move on regardless of what background you had coming in. Competency, so this is a word that I coined with somebody at Johns Hopkins. So you've heard of innumeracy, right, where people don't know about numbers, right? So computational literacy is computency. Remember that. Okay, start using it. So maybe one day it'll be like GPGPU, right? So Mark Harris's invention. All right, and then teaching communication, so how to do technical speaking, how to do presentation. I have like 0 ideas on that, so that'll be cool to talk about too. So I also have an associated website that I put up that I'd love to put your links. So if you have links, I'm going to steal, I'm sorry, Penny's. I'm going to steal all of Penny's references and stick them up there too. So I have this website right here, which takes you to there where I ripped off your guys' neat icon for the well with the computer chip out of the well. That's really cool. And so I have just basically a bunch of links on some of these topics that I wanted to cover, or at least that I wanted to discuss with you guys. So in terms of increasing diversity, I have a couple of links that I think put a little bit more richness or flavor to some of those statistics that we've heard now a couple of times. There's this really cool article that points out that in California, like all of California, 74 black people took the AP Computer Science course, or test at least, in 2013. 74. And a few other interesting notes about Hispanics and women in particular as well. There are a few places. One thing that we've heard from Mitch and then also from Penny is about changing what people think of when they think of what is the image of a computer programmer, of a technologist. Right, and so there's this really great article that you can find about changing the archetype of what is supposed to be a techie. So you can take a look at that as well. Penny mentioned this about you increase diversity by making computer science about more than computer programming. You make it about creative problem solving in the context of social applications, and that helps you get more women potentially if for some reason they have a disproportionate interest in that kind of stuff. And it helps you get more people with that variety of interest, right? So social and creative problem solving for social problems. You want accessibility, so this is where how I teach introductory computer science, or how we would teach introductory computer science, makes such a big difference, because I think you want to be able to see from the student's perspective, as Mark talked about. You want to have interesting problems. You want to maybe do physical exercises. You want to provide lots of material for all the different kinds of learning that different people have, right? Kinesthetic, oral, right? Visual, right? So you want to interact with the material in all of these different ways. So accessibility, and we'll talk about that more. And then recruitment is a serious one. I know that CMU was mentioned, but there's an alternative approach at Columbia, which is we're not going to change what we teach at all. We're just going to focus on keeping the people that are there, right? Recruitment, basically. And I think this is more about community, about making sure that they know, that making sure that any underrepresented minority knows that there's a community of people in the same field, right? Seeing role models, it's the same idea. So that's all I kind of have to say about that, because there's a lot, because there were 2 previous talks basically about this exact subject. Do you guys have any points that you wanted to bring up about diversity that you didn't get to point out previously? Yeah, Mark?
I just watched a great PyCon 2015 keynote on diversity problems, and I'd like to send you a link to it.
Okay. Yeah, PyCon is a really cool conference. I wanted to attend that.
And I don't remember the speaker's name, but it's like, oh my gosh, this is great.
Great. Yes?
Do you see anything fundamentally different about computer science versus other, for lack of a better term, traditionally male areas, medicine, other sciences, engineering, things like that?
Yeah, I was trying to think about that when it was brought up before, and I mean, to me, it really is about the image that people have of it going in, right? And I think that has a big effect on how interested you're going to be, and you want that encouragement so that you're, as a professor, you're supposed to take advantage of your position as a mentor, as a role model or parent or parental kind of figure, and encourage them by saying, "Oh, you're good at this. Maybe you should go on to the next course," and stuff like that. And I don't think, it seems like, I don't know. Is computer science any different? It doesn't seem like it to me. There are lots of places where you really have to think logically about problem solving, right? And where you have to think very precisely. So yeah, without getting into too much detail. Yes, Steve?
I was at a memorial service of OBGYN faculty here, Jerry Hulka, this year, and at it, spoke the first woman OBGYN resident in North Carolina, or maybe in the nation, at a tertiary care medical school. And point is that things have changed in some of these fields in, the 40 or 50 years that we're talking about, and law also. Very much so. And the point is that, okay, we're in a bad way now, but that doesn't say with appropriate steps we can't get the same kind of behaviors.
Yeah.
I'm really confused from the perspective of somebody who's in industry and does hiring of new college grads, masters and bachelors. We do not see a shortage of women. We have probably half of my team is women. And a good flow of applicants are working on bachelor's and master's programs. The shortage, one of the reasons might be, you hear a lot in the news media about H-1B visas and whether there should be more or whether there should be less. And from my perspective, the real problem that we've got from a diversity perspective is not being able to find Americans.
Yeah.
That's why I had to say underrepresented minorities, and that could mean anything that's actually underrepresented.
I have to tell you that we were in the process of hiring a new bachelor's degree computer science person, and I interviewed, I think, 6 or 7 or 8 people, not one American, but 50% women.
Huh. So they don't have the same archetype in other parts of the world?
No, I was thinking about the archetype that says
No, it's different, and in fact, in some places, computing is an appropriate field for a woman because engineering is not.
And you were
And so
saying
it goes the other way.
the first computer programmers were women. The first computers were women,
Yeah.
right? That's the cool.
Literally.
They were
Exactly.
literally called that. Yeah.
But
From a
getting-
diversity perspective, my question is, how do we get Americans into this?
Part of what we're not producing in Americans, if you look at the groups who don't participate equally, right, women, underrepresented minorities, that's 70% of the potential pool that's already taking themselves out, right? And so that's limiting the number of Americans that you can get. The other thing that's happening that you may not see so much among who's getting top jobs is, it sort of comes from that curve of who drops out, is if you look, sort of an anecdote is that we'll know we've arrived if the average women stay in the field, because right now you only get the ones who are the really hot
You have that really
stars.
cool
You really get
graph.
the ones at the top, right? So if you're recruiting at a place where you're really just getting the cream of the crop, you might be seeing things that are more equal, right? But we got lots of average guys, and average guys are good enough for a lot of things. We don't have as many average women because because they're pushed out.
That could be the community aspect, right? I mean, like if there aren't any average women there, then if you are an average woman, then you're not going to stay in, right? So that would be kind of self-fulfilling.
It's cumulative, right? The forces forcing you out are cumulative. So one thing's not going to do it, but the weight of the ton of feathers does.
On Americans, I was going to say we're lazy, but I think that there is a lack of interest in heavily computational fields, and I don't know if is that broad?
Mathematics.
In mathematics in particular. I had so many people, now I taught at a liberal arts college where people had breadth of experience anyway, but the degree to which they hated me for expecting them to remember their high school geometry and trigonometry was embarrassing in a senior level computer graphics class. You know, I can't talk about high school geometry. I have to talk about, you know, linear algebra. We're going to do math in this class, you know, and it was a real tension point is, oh, he expects me to know that stuff that I must have passed, right, in order to get into college in the first place. I think there's a real competency aversion, right? So, yeah.
I think if we look back into the mid to late 90s, we'll also see a model where we were getting a lot of comp sci undergrads, both male and female, and it was because all of a sudden there's lots of jobs, right? Writing the .NET wave. Oh my gosh, there's actual money to be made. Yeah, you can earn a living doing this work, and I think that in part is one of the attractions, or was one of the attractions to increase education, increase participation at the job level.
I think parents have a lot to do with it, like because I think we've seen a real rise in computer science majors, obviously recently, and I know at my previous school we were at about 40% graduates who were women. And I think it's just, you know, your parents tell you to go do that, you do it, you see you're good at it, and you stay in it, because they were pretty outcome oriented. You know, a lot of the students, at least at my school, were real great and outcome oriented.
I have two daughters.
Yeah.
Tried to encourage them to go into some sort of computer related field.
And
they thought I was nuts. Why?
There's this great thing.
That's just not what they want to do.
Who's your dad?
There's a great. I have one of my colleagues from Washington Lee has a couple of young daughters, and they would be playing on their cell phones, and he would be like, "Well, aren't you interested in knowing about how this stuff works?" And that brought me to thinking about something. There's this great quote from Douglas Adams about 3 ways that we look at technology, right? And it has to do with our age, how we approach technology. If something was discovered or invented before you're 15, then it's natural and just a natural part of the world, and it's, you know, you expect to have it everywhere. If it's invented or discovered sometime between the ages of 15 and 35 for you, then it's new and exciting, and you might be able to get a career in it, right? And I think that's where a lot of the people in the 80s were coming from, right? That this is new and exciting, and this is really coming out. If anything is invented after you're 35, then it's completely unnatural and doesn't belong in the world. So I was telling somebody about this, and I was driving on these roads, and I don't know how to pour concrete, and I don't know how to build buildings, and I don't know how to do lots of stuff because it has no interest to me at all. And I was thinking about that. Well, now you live with your cell phone. It's not at all interesting. All right, if you grew up with your cell phone, it's not something that you think about that this is a serious thing that's really cool and brand new. It's magical to you. It's something that's totally part of the world, like the concrete and like these walls. And anyway, so I think there's an issue with that. About teaching classes, I wanted to maybe if I could change just for a second. I know we only have a few minutes, but. I really like some of the things that Mark said about playing games. There's a cool article that I have on the website that you can look at, a couple of different ACM, and of course there's SIGSI, right? So the SIGSI, their papers like every year come out that talk about how to improve education like that. But in terms of the things you're supposed to do to improve accessibility is about playing physical games, about seeing things from multiple perspectives. And so there's this great article, Everything I Needed to Know About Teaching Computer Science I Learned in kindergarten, right? So it's about playing games and using cards. Like when I have my programmers, we program in Python, right? When I have them program craps, we play craps first. I mean, you have to play craps in order to know how to program it, right? If you're going to play poker, if you're going to be able to program like a blackjack game, you should probably play a few rounds of blackjack, right? If you're going to solve the Tower of Hanoi, you should be given the Tower of Hanoi to see what you're supposed to be doing, right? So you should interact with it. And I think that what I like to do is have sort of a hybrid lecture lab is what I like to call it, or at least what my teaching statement likes to call it, where the idea is that it's basically a cycle of here's a new problem, let's talk about it for a while in small groups, and then let's come together and solve the problem. So it's just basically like a repeated lab hybrid lecture cycle. And I think a lot of students learn really quickly out of that, and they get nothing, almost nothing out of my lectures. So has anybody found anything like that as well, or do you have other points that you like to bring up in undergraduate teaching that affect outcomes like that?
Students tend to consider those sorts of classes a joke. Has been my recent observation. The sort of inverted classes and things like that. Now, maybe you're not talking about a full inversion, whatever that means, but
I do talk a lot in my hybrid lecture
that
lab.
would not be, that would be lecturing, sort of what I would consider the more traditional style. But the undergraduates that I've talked to don't really, they seem to consider those classes jokes compared to more traditional stuff that we might have experienced.
Yes, it's what they're accustomed to. But, you know, they watch Kevin's lectures on the bus. They watch them over and over. They, you know, I think you can play to that audience. You just gotta approach it right.
Yeah.
And the learning outcomes, for the people who show up for class, the learning outcomes are better. So whether they consider it a joke or not, if they're learning more, maybe it accomplished its mission.
Yeah.
The past 6 years I've been teaching an app development course every semester, iOS in the fall and Android in the spring. And the teaching method that I use is in fact the inverted classroom. So the flipped classroom, I assign tutorials or videos or whatever materials that you learn that they do at home, and then or in the dorm rooms, and then they come in, and the entire period is all application, and using the techniques that they learned in the video or the tutorial, and applying it to a specific problem, or sometimes even a generic problem. I say, you know, build an app that has this, that, and this other feature, and I don't care what it is, what the app does, as long as it's got these various features. And that's even more interesting because, you know, different people come in with totally different applications, and I ask them to show it off. I mean, to present it, you know, briefly in class, and everybody is. And here's one last point I'm going to make about this. There will always be the student who will go beyond what is expected, because I mean that's just the way that student is. He's so excited about it. And when he makes his presentation, the class goes, "Whoa, how'd you do that?" And then you know, everybody gets to learn about how. And I didn't have to do anything. Right? The student actually taught me. So I mean I've found the flipped classroom or
The dilemma I have with that, and I wonder how you dealt with it, is for the student who is not fast.
Yeah.
All right, you know,
Yeah.
the one who that class period was not going to be enough time by half.
It's 10 to
All right.
15% is what I've
Yeah.
seen. It's 10 to 15% of every one of my classes I'm going too fast for. And I thought that was a decent number. Other people didn't really think that was a good number, but I thought
15% didn't think of it.
no, the 10 to 15% hated my guts, but I thought that was good. But I mean,
So I worry about that. So how do you deal with the student who's not fast?
Yeah, you identify them early, and then you take them aside and not tutor them individually. I have TAs, you know, I say this is what I assign them, but you're right. I mean, there are students who can't keep up with the rest of the class. They're special cases. You just have to
Do you make any effort to weed them out?
Weed them out?
push
Yeah,
them
somebody
away.
who's going to become a better software developer?
no.
Steve?
I want to ask Penny a question.
Yeah.
I have no personal experience with the inverted classroom, but in it, as I understand, in class there is much more mentorship in public and you know, involvement of the professor looking at the specific performances of the students in the classroom, in the exercises that are going on there. Is that a situation which is better for women, or do you have any experience with that?
So I've never completely inverted, but I teach a fairly interactive, I think sort of like Josh is, where I do a lot of small group activities, I do a lot of discussion. I think it has the potential to be better, right? I think both because it spawns interaction between students, and those kinds of connections work well to keep students engaged, work well particularly with students who want computing to be about people and about connections and not about, I'm going to spend my life sitting in a cube writing code, right, which there is that stereotype. So I think to the extent that it builds connections between students and gives you a chance to give feedback, it's a good thing. I think it could go, so just like small work groups can go toxic and can reinforce gender effects, I think that potential is there, and so you have to watch for it. But in general, yeah, I think it is a good approach.
So I'd like to get people's cards who would like to send me information so that I could email you guys and remind you that you promised me stuff. But I'd like to get all of this stuff so I can put it up here, and then I could spit it out to you guys. Just because I'm just going to keep up that site. Yeah, there's so much in that. I think about interacting with students and having small student groups. There's also an aspect of peer tutoring, which is another opportunity for people to learn from each other, which is really great for them in terms of presentation skills, in terms of them becoming good teachers, and in terms of them learning. I think those are really, like, peer tutoring is like a really big part of what I try to do.
Winning there.
Yeah.
Last time I taught 116, I went to the previous years and selected the female students who did well and sent them all emails saying, you should be a teaching assistant for my class.
Yep.
I had to twist several arms because, I'm not sure I remember the material well enough. Of course you do.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, the guys wouldn't even know Python, and they'd say, oh, yeah.
Yeah, of course. The guys are, yeah.
Right, but those women,
There's a whole
they
PhD
were
on
super
peer tutoring.
TAs, all right? And it boosted their confidence that, oh yeah, you know, I could be a leader here. So everybody was winning in that equation.
I think that's a good place to end. We're kind of out of time.
Okay.
I was just going to say, if I could just add on to that. So you did that kind of in private towards these women. Another thing, if you want a double whammy, don't just talk to them. In public, in front of other people, say, you, and you, I want you to be TAs, and everyone sees that, and therefore some of the prestige that you have gets conferred.
I see, interesting, yes,
Prestige.
I like it, yes.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much.